We're live, everybody. A couple minutes late, but that's okay. We're here. My toddler was freaking out. It's all right. We made it. So I'm here. My name is Jenna Overbaugh. I don't usually do the Thursdays, but I am introducing our fancy guest, Sarah McKinnon. She is an OCD advocate. She has a really cool background, great story, awesome energy. So we're bringing her on here to help answer some questions for you guys. And then she's actually going to go solo for the next couple of Thursdays. So she's going to try it out tonight, and hopefully I don't scare her away. Hopefully she'll love it.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah. So Sarah, why don't you give everybody kind of the lowdown of a little bit of background of kind of where you're coming from, and what makes you so interested in the OCD community?
Yeah, my story really begins at childhood, of course, for many people with OCD, but I did not become an advocate until about 2 years ago because I was actually undiagnosed until I was 21 years old, but I had lived with OCD my whole life, and it essentially compounded into multiple different types of subtypes of OCD, again, without the right terminology and professional help. And I had a very hard childhood, but I had amazing parents, and I really fought through the medical community, so much so that I ended up landing in the medical side of creativity. So I'm actually an art director in health advertising. So I work with a lot of mental health NGOs. I work with a lot of other nonprofits that do advocacy for women, advocacy for diabetes, and other oncology groups and all those things. So health has always been my passion, to really bridge the gap between the public health community, which I think really lacks that creative edge to get to young adults, to get to children, to get the right education. And that's kind of where my passion started. But it really began on a bathroom floor, if I'm being honest. I grew up with panic attacks and dry heaving for 18 years, and I was very sick, and I was constantly in the hospital. And I am a suicide survivor, and that is really when my story began. I was kind of renewed. For me, I'm a Christian, so I was renewed through Jesus, as I like to say, honestly. But it's just been a long walk since then, and I'm on a path of recovery and healing. And I really like to talk about happiness and that reality of recovery, and that recovery is possible no matter where you are in your OCD journey, where you think you can be. I did not see myself this healthy and this alive 2 years ago when I was very sick. And that's kind of just like my foundation, where I want to go. And little rundown.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know whether this was from your website or just Instagram or things you've posted, but I look at you and I just see sunshine and sunflowers. And that doesn't mean, I don't say that to say that good vibes only, everything is great, but it's you obviously have this dark past, like many people with OCD have. And, we get so many questions about recovery and how is it possible that I could ever manage this? What does recovery look like in OCD? Is it possible to be cured? And I think that you are the image of what I hope for my members, is that you are going to have it, and you're going to get to a place of acceptance with it, and you can still live a totally fulfilling life. So if we get any questions like that, I'd love to have your perspective, because we get them all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And I've had people coming to me. I've had parents reaching out. My daughter, my son, they need help. Is a cure possible? And it's really changing our terminology on such mundane words like happiness and recovery and cure, and really level setting what that means. It has been ultimately the key and the secret for me with getting through recovery. So I'm just so happy to talk about it, honestly, in any way.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's get to our first question. Yeah. And if there are any questions that you see that you're oh my gosh, I don't think you can pull them like I can, but you can still tell me and we'll go for it. So daily art grind. How do we deal with OCD creeping up on us when we have a good day? When I'm happy, I think this is strange. Either something bad is going to happen or my OCD will flare up, and it does. So first of all, I think that this is a totally normal and typical and common occurrence for people who have OCD, for people who have mental health dilemmas in general. I think we tiptoe around it a lot, and it's hard for us to be present in a day that's enjoyable or supposed to be enjoyable, because if we're not feeling anxious, we're either feeling anxious or we are tiptoeing and kind of waiting for that anxiety to come, like you're saying. And so one thing that I will say is that we all have what's called a confirmation bias. And so what that basically means is that if you're looking for something, you're going to find it. And so if I had you drive to work or to school or whatever and look for blue Jeeps, you would find a bunch of blue Jeeps. It doesn't mean that there were suddenly on this route all the more blue Jeeps than any other route you took. It's just that you were looking for them more. And so you notice them more. And again, what you are looking for, you're going to find. And so hypothetically, also, if I asked you now remember all the yellow cars that you saw. Well, you were only looking for blue Jeeps, so you don't remember the yellow cars, right? You don't even remember whether you saw one or whether you didn't or how many. And so our brains are so malleable in that way. Like they're formed by, our brains are kind of formed, and what we remember and what we experience is really formed by our expectations. And so in this situation, I would definitely encourage you to just try to keep an open mind, right? Like when you're having those intrusive thoughts of like, well, is your OCD going to flare up? Can you really enjoy this day? You can't help your intrusive thoughts popping up, but you can help the thoughts that you conjure up and your response to those thoughts that pop up. So, you know, when those thoughts pop up, like, is your OCD gonna interrupt this good day? Like maybe your OCD is just gonna flare up and you're not gonna be able to enjoy it. Maybe, I don't know, but I'm okay with however I feel. I'm gonna still go and do whatever it is that I needed to do anyway. I'm still gonna go and do those things. That OCD can come with me. It can either be there or it cannot be there, but I'm still gonna go and move ahead with whatever it was that I had planned regardless. And I bet you that you will find that with that attitude, you probably will have an even better day. That it might be a kind of neutral day. Maybe it won't be out of this world, like totally incredible, but maybe it'll be okay. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I struggle with this on almost a daily basis. So even as someone in recovery, this is a very active thing, it's a very active struggle. And I definitely give my therapist the run for their money, trying to crack the code, thinking that this was some weird thing I could solve. And you said it perfectly. I've kind of identified them as fantastical happiness and realistic happiness. And I do believe, regardless if you have OCD or not, if you are just a living person with a mind, we do have fantastical minds. When we wake up in the morning, are influenced through media, through conversations of what we perceive our day should be based on our set standards of what we presume is going to happen in the day. And we kind of build this fantasy about, if not your mundane day, then an event, a birthday party, something you're looking forward to. We kind of build up these emotions into this fantasy-like mindset. At least I do. I can't speak for anyone else. And I found that because my bar was up here with my expectations, I was often let down. And that was usually when OCD would come in and strike with the intrusive thoughts. So I've learned to really analyze my day and like, what can I realistically control? If I'm having a bad day or if I start with a panic attack, because that absolutely happens, it doesn't mean I have to toss out the rest of my day. You know what? I had a bad 2 or 3 hours. Here are some other good things I can incorporate. What can I realistically fold into my day that makes me feel good? What acts of gratitude can I write down or discuss with someone to actually reshift my mindset? It took a lot for me to learn not to throw out a whole day. I had a bad morning. I didn't sleep well last night, and I just toss out the 24 hours. And once I kind of changed my attitude about like, what can I control outside of my body, because I can't quite control my intrusive thoughts, it really changed how I perceive happiness and how I identify a good and bad day, which is going back to that changing your vocabulary on common things. And it makes a difference for me in recovery, because I have bad days every week. I'm still struggling, but I'm also very much alive and having great days too. So it's good to know the difference.
Yeah, I love that. This is why I love having new advocates on, because I've been doing this for 12 years and I feel like I always learn something new, or like a new perspective or a new way to describe something. I absolutely love that. And yeah, I mean, so many people in the chat are like, this is the perfect question. So obviously, Daily Art Grind and Sarah, you are not alone. I think we all view happiness as like this North Star. And like, once we get there, we know how to achieve it and we can always have it. We can always kind of maintain it, but that's never the case, even for a fully functioning person who doesn't have OCD, right? Like no one is happy all the time. It is kind of the standard to have those good days and those bad days. And You can still live a fully fulfilled life. And like you said, not write off an entire day just because of a bad thought or just because of a bad couple of minutes or a bad hour. Awesome. Sarah, I feel like this one is all you. So hopefully with this person, we can find like a good balance, because scrupulosity can be so hard for people. Brandon, I've been starting to struggle with religious scrupulosity. I've had intrusive thoughts that are contrary to my beliefs, of course, because that's how OCD works, right?
Always.
And it's scaring me because I feel I may have been blasphemous and can't be forgiven. And so, yeah, scrupulosity can be tricky. Not that other ones can't be tricky. They can all be tricky for sure. But this is another perfect instance of how OCD latches onto your values, takes control of that itty bitty little doubt that you have, even if it's a 0.00001%, and tries to kind of go haywire with it. So Sarah, I'll let you have this first, since this is kind of your thing.
Sure. Yeah, I can give some slight background. I am a new believing Christian, and I currently attend a Presbyterian church, if that helps this particular person. And oh my gosh, do I deal with this all the time. My poor boyfriend always has to reach in the pew and grab my hand because I'm wringing them from my anxiety of exactly this. And as you pointed out, OCD goes after what we love and value most. And if you are someone in the church community, if you are a religious person who is practicing actively, your love for God and your love for Jesus and your love for your church community runs very deep, and your OCD is going to go right after that. The tip I can always give is lean into that church community. I think this applies to anything, whether it's school or academia, whether it's the workplace and not just religion, is that when we are attacked by our OCD, our first instinct is to flight. We want to run away. We think we are being ostracized in our heads. And the church community is usually very powerful, and it's a very safe place to go. Finding one or two people to mentor you, whether it's the pastor, the pastor's family, or some elders in your church to kind of give you points to lean into, focusing on your prayer life, accepting that dry seasons in your prayer and scripture life will happen because OCD is exhausting. And sometimes I don't read my Bible for 2 weeks, but kind of bringing that habit back in and going back into scripture for me really, really helps. And again, like finding other Christians who kind of can understand what you're dealing with mental health and your particular background is huge. And they can support you through that, encourage you, get into accountability group, prayer groups. Everyone wants to kind of build around each other. And that's made a huge difference for me. I have accountability groups, I have prayer groups, discipleship groups, and they kind of hold me even when I feel like I can't hold myself. And that's a great place to start. And of course, going to your therapist and working through the specific intrusive thoughts is a good formula.
I love that. And, you know, I think this is one of those situations where OCD can take something that you normally would love to do and value, like, you know, involving yourself in your church community, praying, reading the Bible, whatever it might be for you, practicing, you know, religion in whatever way that is for you. And it will make you feel like you have to do it or else something bad is going to happen, versus that you just want to because it makes you feel good and because it's your value. And so I would encourage you or anyone else out there with scrupulosity to be really asking yourself, like, why am I praying right now? Am I praying because I feel like I have to? Like, if I don't, something bad is going to happen. Like, I am going to be sent to hell, or I am not going to be forgiven. Or is it one of these things like I'm praying because that's when I feel connected. Like I want to be doing that. That's how I stay connected. That's my feel good thing. And it's a really subtle difference, but it's kind of like exercise, right? Like you can exercise because it feels good and because of the benefits, or you can start to have a dysfunctional relationship with exercise because you're afraid if I don't exercise, something bad will happen. And you can see how when you go that route, like it becomes something that you don't want to do. It's no longer a valued activity. It becomes dysfunctional. It becomes more of a chore. It's more of an avoided task. And it's daunting. Like Sarah said, like this is not how it's supposed to feel. So a good ERP therapist too will be able to work with you not on eliminating prayer, not on eliminating your church practices. That's not what we want to do. We want you to actually have a healthier relationship with those things. And by doing it because you feel blasphemous and by doing it because you feel like you can't be forgiven, by avoiding it, by doing all these things, like that's not you having a healthy relationship with your religion or with your spirituality. And so we want you to have a healthy relationship. We want that to be something that brings you joy and brings you peace, not something that you feel like you have to do. Otherwise, this awful consequence is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. A small tidbit, God is more powerful than your OCD. And that's something I've had to constantly tell myself on a daily basis when I go through these thoughts and deal with recovery and try not to relapse. Hold on to that while you go through your immediate therapies and whatnot. It really helps.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. I'm struggling to do exposure therapy because of low motivation. How do you get motivated to do therapy? So I think this is a common one. Whether we like to admit it or not, sometimes we just don't have the motivation. And I think motivation is one of those things that is kind of it can wax and wane, right? So you can maybe start off with really solid and high motivation, but maybe you lose that a couple weeks in, and maybe you gain it back. And it's not always this steady thing. Sometimes it is a little bit more waxing and waning, and that's okay. You could look up, and what your therapist might try to do with you is some techniques taken from an intervention called motivational interviewing. So motivational interviewing is basically a certain way of kind of questioning, a certain way of kind of pondering, where you want to be versus where you're at now, and kind of how to close those gaps. So identifying, where you want to be, certain goals that you have, whether that's academic or occupational, financial, socially, whatever, kind of contrasting that with where you're at right now, and just realizing like, okay, what are the barriers that are getting in the way of that? Like, what are the pros and cons to continuing to live the life that you are currently living? One of the first things that I used to do, we don't do it at NoCD, but we used to do it at Rogers Memorial Hospital, where I used to work in the residential setting. The first thing that we would do with individuals is we would have them fill out kind of it was called an inconvenience review. And basically have them document the pros and cons of getting better, because there are both, even if you have to kind of dig a little bit. And then the pros and cons of continuing to stay the way that they are and to continue to just live life as is. And there are pros and cons to that too. And so I think it's truly a matter of, I think that everyone has to be inconvenienced by their OCD enough to change. And so if some people, if you're not at the point and it's kind of low motivation for therapy, sometimes it's just, you're just not ready yet. And maybe, you just need to evaluate the pros and cons a little bit more, maybe look at the motivational interviewing techniques, and also ask yourself, like, is it low motivation, or maybe are you scared of treatment? Are you just not feeling hopeful about treatment? Because those are things that a therapist can help you with too, or even just a supportive community, like a support group or these webinars could help with, right? So if you're not feeling motivated for therapy, but maybe a little bit of that is because exposure therapy just sounds really scary, like someone might be able to clarify that for you, right? So that might help in your motivation. And this might seem a little harsh, but there's a great quote from Lauren McKinnon, who is going to actually be on our webinar here in a couple days. I think she's now the Obsessive Mind on Instagram. She has an amazing post. Like, this is the post that I remember from her. I saw it like months ago, and it said, motivation is not a prerequisite for action. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's really harsh, but I actually really like that. And like, that's not what I want to hear on a bad day. I want to be like, of course, yeah, so you need motivation for action, da, 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 da. But I don't know. I think sometimes sometimes we need to do this discussion about motivational interviewing. Sometimes we need to discuss inconvenience reviews and pros and cons and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I think that there are some things that even if you don't really, 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 really want to, you got to do it. And you don't find the want for it, you make the want for it. And by doing it a little bit here and there, I think then you build your motivation, right? So research shows that by starting a task, your motivation for that task actually increases. And so usually, as with most things anxiety related, it's not usually as bad as what we think it's going to be. And so a lot of the oomph really comes from just having to get started. And if you can kind of just get started, it does seem to get easier. Sarah, do you have any other thoughts about that?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. I've gone through seasons of this. And I think it's important to recognize that even if you're in therapy, you're going to go through seasons of being highly motivated. And that also comes from other life pressures around you. You might have a lot of other expectations on your plate or things kind of getting in the way or threatening to invade in that therapy time. The one thing, I have a very demanding full-time job. And there are times when my job tries to overstep into that time that I've blocked off. But I find blocking time off for therapy, setting it to be consistent every week, just like exercise, our bodies like routine and habit. So by having the same time, if you're able with your therapist or with your team, to do it repetitively, kind of creates a bond and expectation. And you mentioned like communicating with your therapist and like, you know what, I'm really not motivated to be at this appointment. And they can probably help you decipher the reasons. Some of it could just be mental fatigue. Some of it could be fear. And they're going to have the tools to help you work through that better than anyone else, better than you trying to decipher it within your head and justify, because we're going to talk ourselves out of it. I can't tell you how many times I've talked myself off of the spin bike. And I go, okay, I tricked myself. I'm going to give myself 5 minutes. So if you're kind of in a funk with my therapist, I've also done where I will text her and be like, can we do a shorter appointment? Can we just do 30 minutes? I don't feel the need, or I'm kind of overly anxious, or I'm really tired, or I have a lot of other things going on. So we cut the therapy time down, just for a week. And I find that can help like give me a little breathing room, or I'll find, oh my gosh, I actually need the full hour, but the 30 minutes convinced me I could do it. So there's little tricks that you can get your feet there. But it happens to everyone for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Even again, like fully functioning individuals who do not have OCD, right? Like there are days I don't feel motivated to take care of my toddler. Like I just don't feel like going and picking him up from daycare. Like I just need a break. And obviously that's not a consistent thing, but just not, I think, having the expectation too of things having to be perfect. I think sometimes we set ourselves up for failure. We anticipate, like we have these just really high standards, and that can lead to poor motivation because it just seems just like we put too much pressure on ourselves. And so maybe just having the mentality instead of like, I need to complete the entire 12-week no CD protocol, that can feel really overwhelming. Like I can see why someone might not have the motivation for that. But how about like today, I'm just going to make that free 15-minute phone call and talk to the care team. Like just small baby steps might feel like it's more manageable and therefore a little bit more motivating to try to accomplish.
Absolutely. And one side note that I've learned is if you have to skip a week, or if you have a season where you're more down and you're less motivated, it does not cancel out all the work you've already done. I think we have a common mentality of like use it or lose it. And there are consequences when we stop something repetitive, but ultimately like you've still taken the steps, you've still gone really far. It's not going to be a cancel culture here with like, you're not a number. It's not a numeric system. Like, oh, that's it. I've lost all my hard work. You can always put your shoes back on and try again.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's so awesome. So, Sarah, as someone in recovery, I knew we'd get a question like this. We always do. And I love hearing other people's perspective on it. So, Josh, as I near the end of my treatment with no CD, congratulations. My therapist said she believes my OCD to be in remission. What exactly does this mean? So, this might be synonymous kind of like in recovery or like significantly improved. But Sarah, what does that look like for you? Like as someone who has a fulfilled life and as someone who is active, just came back from vacation, like you're here speaking and advocating, but you still have those days. Yeah. What does this look like for you? What does it mean for OCD to kind of be in remission?
Sure. I mean, obviously it's very different per person. Course. And where I was when I first started this journey 2 years ago was I was debilitated. I could not get out of bed. I could not take out the trash. I was starving myself. My attacks were almost getting into hallucination territory where I'd lock myself in a bathroom for 3 days because I was convinced I committed a hit and run or something that messed with my harm OCD in particular, or my responsibility OCD. And obviously I've gone strides from then. But for me now, life is where my OCD does not dictate my day-to-day living. And by that, I can have 50 intrusive thoughts. There's days where I have more intrusive thoughts than others. I can watch triggering content, read triggering content, and I'm able to capture that thought and let it go and continue on with A, that exposure, or B, whatever I have plans. And the biggest thing, honestly, like that's kind of an obvious one, is my communication has gotten so much better. I have kind of built this little infrastructure around me of like safety nets for myself when I fall, because I still do fall, it's just not as hard as I used to. And that means communicating with my loved ones around me, what to do in a panic attack, you know, kind of raising my hand of like, you know, this is too much exposure, or I can't do this today, or I need assistance. Part of recovery is asking for help more frequent than maybe you thought you needed to before, and being okay with it. And so having those thoughts, letting them go, being okay to lean into your community and friends and loved ones, and really just where like I feel like my avocation and my need to talk about my OCD is stronger than being crippled and ashamed by my OCD. So it looks like all kinds of things. Ultimately, like I know I am strong enough to get through a trigger or a thought. I can even go into a panic attack and sit there actively and know I'm going to get through this and I'm going to be fine. And that's so powerful, because I think before, and for the majority of my life, I would sit in a trigger or a panic attack and think, I'm not going to get through this, I'm not going to survive. And it's really, really cool when you kind of have this two-dimensional space in your head when you go, okay, this is going to pass. This is going to pass, and my life is going to keep going. My day is going to keep going. And that's so powerful for me. And that's kind of what I identify as recovery. And I know a relapse when it comes. Sometimes I have a quote-unquote relapse, as I like to call it. And I know I'm going to get through those too. Relapse does not mean I'm going backwards. It just means I'm having a moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's awesome. And that's a great thing to think about as well as you enter this new season.
Yeah, there's another Instagram post, so many good things on social media, about, I love that you mentioned the panic attack scenario, because the post was from Drew Slaughter, who I love, The Anxious Truth. And it was about how, like, the only thing that you need to do for a panic attack is to let it happen. And that is so counterintuitive, especially when you're in it. Like, are you crazy? No. Like, how do I just let this happen? Like, give me something, give me a coping skill, give me something to do. But the reality is that by fighting it, you are making it worse. By fighting it, you are making it worse. And so what I love so much about what you said is like, I'm going to get through this. Like, this is really uncomfortable right now, but I'm going to get through this. Like, and in having that attitude and approaching it that way and engaging with your panic that way, you are sitting with it. You're not making it worse. And you're actually, it's probably getting better because you're not engaging with it that way.
Yeah, you're taking the power away. It's so cool when you can actively feel yourself depowering your intrusive thoughts, and you get to that level. It's amazing. And just, I find I'm more assertive for myself. If I need a mental health day from work, I don't apologize anymore. I know my benefits. I know my resources. I go in and I take a mental health day. I communicate that I need help. I assert when I've hit my limits, because I know my body, and I know that this is a chronic thing and this is lifelong, for me at least. So that's great too. When you're in recovery, you kind of get like this armor on almost, and you're just ready to tackle anything, which is pretty cool.
And I was just talking to someone the other day. I forget whether it was like a member or maybe someone during this webinar, or they're like, but how can I accept living with this every day? Like, they just still couldn't. I mean, even with the most hopeful spin, like what we're going on now, right? Like that we're not going to cure it. We're not going to go in your brain and just zap it out. That implies that there's like some cure that we just go in and it's gone and you don't have to do the work for it. And it's not this lifelong thing. I do feel like you can get to a point where you no longer meet diagnostic criteria for it. I do feel like you said, Sarah, that you can get to a point where it's no longer dictating your decisions. Like I've said to myself already 2 times today that stand out to me, probably even more, like OCD, anxiety. No, you are not making that decision for me. And that doesn't mean that I mean, that to me is recovery. Like that to me is recovery, where I can notice it. Like you said, I have the thoughts. There are some days where I have 50 thoughts, right? Yeah. And it's not about the occurrence of the thoughts. It's about what you do with it. When I worked at Rogers, and some of you might have listening, whether it's live or in recording, you might have actually done this yourself, but we would always have people go around with a little composition notebook. And in this composition notebook, they had to write down all their rituals, all their compulsions. And every day they had to carry this little composition notebook around with them. It was a little pocket notebook. And whenever they felt themselves having an urge an urge to wash their hands, to seek reassurance, to avoid, to check, or do whatever it was that their rituals were, they had to break out this band book and do like a little tally mark, whether they gave into that ritual or whether they resisted that ritual. And what we would always tell them is to keep your books, we call them ban books, BAN, as though that behavior was like banned. And we would always say, keep your ban books, because you might have 50 urges day 1 of treatment. Day 50 or day 100 of treatment, you might still have 50 urges, the same number of urges that you had on day 1, but your response to those urges are going to be completely different. Yeah. Right? So instead of just giving in to 50 out of 50 urges and ritualizing through all 50 of those, maybe you're resisting 49 out of 50 of them. Like, that's recovery. Mm-hmm. And people, I mean, of course, we would hope that thoughts become less frequent, that thoughts become less intrusive or less vivid and less troublesome. And sometimes that's just like a beneficial byproduct, but that's not the goal. The goal of treatment is not to get rid of these thoughts. The goal is to be able to accept them. Like Sarah, you're the perfect example. And yeah, I think that's remission. I think that's recovery.
Yeah. My OCD has mutated too. Since when I was a small child to now, my OCD is constantly evolving, and I hit new triggers. It still happens. And there are days when I'm very angry at my OCD, but I don't identify as my OCD anymore. I don't identify as my disabilities anymore. And OCD and mental health, not to discredit anyone's experience, but just from my own walk, has made me very powerful as a person and has given me beneficial like experience and empathy for others and an ability to connect on an emotional level that some people will never understand. And I'm not trying to say that to outweigh the struggle and what we've been facing, but there is an immense learning and lessons within your journey. And if someone asked me to like go back and change anything, honestly, I wouldn't. And that's like after surviving suicide, I still would say I wouldn't change anything. And I think that for me really speaks volumes as to how it's like I've separated my identity from my OCD. And this is just part of my walk, my makeup. Yeah, I could talk about that for like 5 hours. It's okay.
Yeah, that's so true. I have one of my favorite quotes. I have it printed right by my bed. It is my symbol of treatment, my symbol of recovery. It's a Rumi quote, and it says, "The wound is the place where the light enters you."
Oh, I love that.
And I love that so much because it's exactly what we're talking about, right? Like, I had a lot of intrusive thoughts about my son. I struggled with postpartum OCD. He's 3.5 now. And I struggled for the first 1.5 years of his life. I did not want to be alone with him. I remember just like looking at the clock on my stove, and I feel like the first 1.5 years of his life, like I just looked at the stove. Like I just looked at the stove waiting for my husband to come home. And now, like after having done my own therapy and after having worked hard for the past 1.5 years, I love time alone with my son now. Like, not only do I love it because I always wanted to love it, like that capacity was always in me. Now I'm so much more appreciative of it than I feel like other moms are. Yeah. Because I didn't get that. And like, I know what it's like to not feel that way. I know what it's like to feel on the other side of it, like that I don't want to be alone with him and that like it's the worst thing in the world to be alone with him, but I wanted that so badly. And so now, like in 2 weekends where I booked a trip to go to Madison, just the two of us, my husband's going to stay home and we're going to go to the zoo. We're going to do it. Like, I'm going to be alone with him the whole entire weekend. And like that weekend is going to be so special. Moms do it all the time, but it's special to me. And it wouldn't be that special unless I had that experience. And so I hope everyone can get to the point. Like, you don't have to embrace your journey the way that like maybe parts of what it seems like Sarah and I maybe have every once in a while, right? Like, you don't have to love it. You don't have to get to the point of like, you know, I wouldn't change anything, but I hope that everyone can get to the point where they at least can accept it without that additional suffering of like, yeah, I do have OCD and it's awful in a lot of ways. And, you know, I'm not going to do anything to exacerbate that suffering. You know, I want to at least accept it and work on it. And who knows where I'll be with it in the future. But, you know, I'm here with it now. And I have a lot of support that's available to me in the form of these webinars and accessible therapy and all those other things. So
That's so encouraging. Thank you for sharing that. I'm 22 and I really want kids someday. And I have a fear of postpartum and dealing with OCD with children, given I have harm OCD. So like your life changes, our seasons change. So that's just great to hear like, other people's journeys and different phases of life and different like moments. It's all possible, which is great.
All possible. And it can be good. Like you said, there are gifts. There are definite gifts there. I just wanted to show you Sarah. Sarah's story is relatable. It was like that for me as well last year. Couldn't get out of bed and did compulsions all day long. So it's crazy. We are not alone. You guys are all in this together. Alrighty. So many good questions. I try really hard not to answer any reassurance questions. So try to find questions that are like generalizable to everybody.
Yeah.
We can talk about this one because this one has come up a lot too. People with OCD feeling like, but what if mine's real? But what if mine's real? So here's the question. I know that you can get urges that don't represent true desires, but with an OCD content of not touching people inappropriately, meaning like, did I touch that person inappropriately? Oh my gosh, what does that mean about me? How do I know that real natural sexual desires to touch aren't also present? So this seems like someone who, and this is really common in OCD, something that's not often talked about because it's so taboo, but does not mean that it doesn't happen. So sexual intrusive thoughts, as far as in this example, oh my gosh, did I touch that person inappropriately? I've worked with so many people who couldn't like go to grocery stores because they were afraid that they would just impulsively touch someone inappropriately. Oh my gosh, what does that mean about me that I had that thought? Does that mean that I actually like that thought? And then your intuition comes back and says, no, you don't like that. That's disgusting. But then your OCD is like, is it?
Mm-hmm.
You sure that it's disgusting? Is it disgusting enough for you? Do you hate that thought enough? Mm-hmm. And so then you start to, again, get that doubt of, well, do I actually want it? Like, well, then you might get that groinal response that throws everyone for a loop, right? Like you might actually feel that arousal sensation, and then it's all downhill from there, right? Like OCD is going just off to the races trying to figure that out. So the thing I want to emphasize here first and foremost is that everyone who has OCD, regardless of the content, will try to justify it, and their OCD is going to try to argue their way out of it as far as like, well, but what if? I know all these other things exist, but what if mine is actually true? And that just goes to show, like, it's all BS. It's all BS.
Oh yeah.
Like someone the other day was just saying this about contamination. Like, I know people have sexual intrusive thoughts, but that's not actually a real concern. My contamination is a real concern. Like, how do I know that my contamination fears aren't going to happen? Like, everyone with OCD would think this about their OCD. Like, why is it, how do I know that mine's not real? So that's just another sneaky, advantageous little jerky trick that the OCD tries to play. It's going to make you doubt. It's the doubt disorder. So not only is it going to make you doubt, how you felt in a situation, it's going to make you doubt that you doubted that situation enough. Like, it's just really, really awful. So yeah, Sarah, what else do you have about that?
I remember, this is just bringing me back. I remember my first day of meeting an OCD specialist. So this is not even treatment. This is like an intake appointment. I was the worst of the worst of the worst of my OCD. I had just met the term OCD like 3 days prior. I had just learned about intrusive thoughts the morning of. I had read an article and I was like, I have to meet this guy. And I'm in a hot sweat sitting in this therapist's office. My mom is next to me. I'm crying. Oh my gosh. What if I'm a serial killer? There's no other answer. And the doctor who, you trust, who's doctors, got the degrees, looks at me and he goes, well, what if you are? I passed out in the chair. I was so mortified that this guy was supposed to be the man that was going to reassure me and saying, oh, you're fine. Oh, here's 10 reasons why you're not.
Did he know about OCD?
Oh, he was an OCD specialist. He was
okay, good.
I thought
when you said doctor, I thought you meant,
no,
I was like, dang, that general doctor was really good.
It was an OCD specialist in New York who was like one of the best in his field in that area. And I passed out in the chair when I came to. He told me about this mentality called plead the fifth. And I'm sure you've heard of this before, but I have to use it all the time. And it is, yep, that may be true or it may not be true, but I'm not going to go evidence seeking and start the rumination cycle again. So when thoughts such as what you wrote, and I have had those thoughts before, I have to plead the fifth and go, yeah, that may or may not be true. And it's really not satisfying, but it works. For me, I'm not a therapist, so you can correct.
That's what we would say. So, and Walt Crow and anyone else out there who's struggling with this, like you have to realize no amount of reassurance, no amount of OCD education is going to be enough for this, right? Like it's never ever going to be enough. And that's the maddening nature that is OCD. It's requiring you to achieve certainty, but making it absolutely impossible for you to meet that standard. So it's never going to be enough. Like whatever that miracle moment is for you or for your OCD of like, okay, good, that wasn't real. Whatever that even looks like, you could experience that and then you would doubt it minutes later because that's OCD, right? So the reality is that we all have these intrusive thoughts. We all have these normal doubts, normal worries. We all have that doubt that maybe real natural sexual desires to touch are there. That's possible. I don't know that. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about that. But what does make OCD problematic, or what makes that thought problematic in the OCD sense, is that you misinterpret that as being significant. So, oh my gosh, the stakes are too high. I have to figure that out. 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 If I don't, something bad is going to happen. If I don't, I'm going to be anxious forever. If I don't, I'm a horrible person. And the reality is that you're never going to get that 100% certainty that you want. That just, it doesn't exist. And so something that I've been telling all my members lately is like that uncertainty is there whether we like it or not. We can either flow with it or we can resist it, but it's there just the same. Like that uncertainty is going to be there. And so it's really truly a matter of like Sarah said, like pleading the fifth, just I'm not going to engage. OCD is like that obnoxious person who just wants to argue with you. Like I'm sure all of you have met or have interacted with one of those individuals who just loves to argue. Like they would argue with you about whether the sky is blue or red or whatever. And they never actually, when they're arguing with you, like they don't actually want to hear what you have to say. They just want the argument. Like they just want to get in that zone. Mm-hmm. OCD is like that. OCD just wants to argue with you, not to hear your side of the story, not to come to some resolution, not to come to an equal playing ground with you. It's just wanting to argue with you and to be a total freaking jerk. And so what you need to do is witness OCD being on that debate stage and you not accept the invitation. You have to declare independence from that. Witness it, just like Sarah said, like, that's scary. I'm not going there. Yeah. I'm not going there. I'm not inviting you to the party. Yeah. I'm not coming to your party, and I'm not coming to that debate stage because it's going to lead me nowhere.
Absolutely. All day, every day.
All day. One more question, and it's not too much different from what we've been talking about, so maybe just a little follow-up, and then we'll call it a night here. Love is an open door. Now that song's going to be stuck in my head all night. Oh, my gosh. My son loves Frozen, so every time I get in the car, like, it's either Frozen or Moana is playing.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh,
Frozen
it's just stuck in my head all night.
Yeah.
Why do we pay so much attention to questions we'll never know the answer to? It's so silly. So any other thoughts on that, Sarah?
Oh my gosh. I have so many thoughts on this. I think it is our biological nature to fix and solve, right? And put OCD aside for a second. That's life. I wake up in the morning with anxiety on my chest about so many small and big things unrelated to my mental health. Just, I need to fix this. I need to do this. And it seems that my body, my heart, my mind, my soul is so at rest. It's so many hours a day because I'm fixing and I'm trying to answer and I'm trying to solve. And, even down to like my purpose, like, why am I on this planet? And the big meta questions that we ask ourselves probably on a weekly basis. Like, what am I doing here? What is for me? What does God want me to do today? And who am I supposed to talk to? And we're constantly analyzing. And I think part of that is our strong desire to have peace. Because in our minds, fixing, asking questions, evidence seeking, whether it's with your OCD or just part of your day, is us trying to scratch and claw for happiness and peace. Again, these bars, these metaphors and these fantastical areas of our lives that we set, that we're clawing for, that we're wishing for, like tomorrow I will be this, or tomorrow I will think this or know this. And that's such dangerous waters to play in at all hours of the day. I think part of it is out of our control. I think it's just like, again, our makeup and like how we process information. But really grounding ourselves and trying to acknowledge, and what you said earlier about OCD was perfect. Like, why am I asking this question? And like, why am I having these thoughts? Really take it a step further and analyze, like, what's the importance? Why is this on the priority list? Why is this alarm going off my head? And it really helps me sort out and kind of make like a hit list of like, okay, these are actual thoughts I need, these things. Like, here are actual chores or tasks I need to solve and fix and get evidence to. And here are the ones that, like, part of life acceptance is accepting we don't have the answers to everything. And there's so much excitement and beauty in that too. If you want to take the positive route, like, I wake up now where I did not before the OCD, and I am so excited. Like, what am I going to learn today? What conversations am I going to have today? Like, I'm still anxious, guys. I still wake up sometimes in a hot sweat. I had a panic attack last night. I was up at 3 a.m, but I still get up, and I'm still excited to see what I'm going to learn and what I am going to find out. And that's the beauty of existing to me. Like, it's kind of uncovering the things and like being gracious and gratuitous for things like throughout our day. But I think it's just our makeup. I think it's what we're designed to do. And that's why you're amazing. And that's why you're going after your dreams and you're trying to fix this part of yourself. I say fix loosely. I think it's just natural, honestly. It's the best I got.
Yeah. I love the concept too of like, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed. Mm-hmm. It's just that your brain is on hyper awareness mode. Your brain is on hyper vigilance mode because you value this thing so much. Yeah. And I guess it comes down to like, can you value this thing in a way that's healthy? Can you still value this thing in a way that works for you and works for your family and works for all the values that you have in your life? So yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, you're having normal intrusive thoughts, you're having normal doubts, you're having normal uncertainties that are not an OCD problem, that are not a Trevor problem, a love is an open door problem, not a Sarah problem. What does become problematic is how we misinterpret significance from those thoughts and then do these compulsions. And we don't have to be doing those things. It feels like we have to be doing those things, but we don't. We have the power to make really incredible change by resisting those rituals. And, it's a long road, but I think I know we're all capable of it. We're all capable of it. Someone else, yeah. I'm just finishing ERP with no CD. I'm so happy. Oh my gosh, I have to share. Lane, awesome job, Lane. I feel so much better after struggling for 10 years, but the same thoughts and no anxiety. And now I feel like my OCD was actually the real me. Which I have accepted, just confused, just normal. Wait, I feel like I need to reread that again.
It's okay, me too.
So what it seems like, Lane, is you're having that seems like that's what recovery is kind of like, right? Like what we're saying is that, you're going to have those thoughts. You're just not necessarily going to have the anxiety about it. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's a little confusing, the wording, but maybe this is the backdoor spike that sometimes people experience. Like, yes. Oh, well, I'm not anxious about that anymore. What does that mean about me? Uh-huh. So Lane, I don't know if that's what you're experiencing. It was a little bit confusing the way you worded it, but if that is what you're experiencing, like, oh my gosh, what does this mean about me now that I'm not anxious about this? That's kind of what we call the backdoor spike. And it's just a really common OCD trick that it plays. It usually accompanies like a transition in care or as you start to recover. So it's just another sneaky trick that the OCD tries to play. It makes you doubt everything. It's the doubt disorder, right? So, you know, it's going to make you doubt your recovery. It's going to make you doubt this. It's going to make you doubt that. Just still apply all the skills that you learned in ERP. Try to apply it to that doubt as well. Awesome. And then
I kind of look at OCD and recovery now. Oh, there's a lag for the towards the end. I think we lapsed over. Okay.
Go back.
I kind of look at OCD now and recovery like coexisting. Because I think I spent right after work, like when I got into recovery, when I finished my treatments, my ERPs, the bulk, the first piece at least, I was like, okay, I got to push out the OCD. Like this cannot be part of me anymore. This cannot be my identity. And I was putting so much energy and time trying to evict my OCD when I realized I had to coexist with it and make space with it and kind of be the landlord of my mind. And that's what I captured from that question. So I just want to encourage you that like you have the power to coexist with your OCD. You don't have to spend all of your recovery stressing and being anxious and ruminating on like, I have to get rid of it. I have to push it out. I can't live happily with this. Because in reality, exposure therapy is to help us coexist with the reality of a condition that cannot be cured, at least for me, at least to my knowledge. And that's just like something I pulled from that question.
Yeah, awesome. So one last quick thing here that I totally forget to mention that I should mention more because I manage the program. I want to remind you all that we offer at NoCD, we have free support groups. And so the way that you can access those, they're free to everybody. So if you are a NoCD member, if you're not enrolled in therapy services with NoCD, that's totally fine too. So you do not need to be enrolled in therapy services to take advantage of our support groups. They're all free. They're available wherever we are accessible with NoCD services. So if you're in the United States, all 50 states, we're also, if you're in the United Kingdom, Australia, and also Canada, you're able to go and join our support groups. And the way that you can access those is just by having the free NoCD app. And it's literally, I have my phone here, so I will show you guys. I will show you. So grab your phones, go to the NoCD app, and it's literally the very, very first page. There's a big glare, but it's this fun little blue box right here that is right on the front page on the forum that says introducing online support groups. So you can go, you can link up, register for free. We have just general managing OCD support groups. We have support groups that are specific to subtype. We have OCD sexual content for people who feel like their themes are a little bit more taboo and they want to be with people who can relate to that. We have young adult groups. We have a new group that's out. It's creativity with OCD. So if you want to come and like do a creative project with your OCD, we have Barbara, who is an art therapist. She's also an OCD therapist. So she's going to be doing some art projects. And that's not just like painting and drawing. You can come and do music. You can come and do art, poetry, whatever. Lots of really, really cool things. We have a relapse prevention and maintaining recovery group. We offer so many cool specialized groups. They're an hour, peer-based. So you'll be with other people who have OCD just like you. They're all led by an OCD therapist and they're really awesome. Really, really awesome. So we have to wrap it up here tonight, but Sarah's going to be back. She's going to be back not just next week, but the week after that. And I forget how many weeks are in August or in July, but probably the week after that too for the next 3.
I think we have 5 weeks total, so 4 weeks. I think it's a long month.
Wow. Okay.
I'm really bad. I don't even know what day it is.
Well, we must not have scared you away too bad because I think you'll be back. So
absolutely, I'll be here.
So yeah, Sarah will be back at least the next couple Thursdays. Next Thursday at 7 p.m. Central for an hour or so, 45 minutes or so to answer your questions again. I know you guys loved her. Sarah, we got tons of feedback about how your story was so relatable. They wanted you to answer more questions, so I'm sure you'll have no shortage of questions for next time. So why don't you really quickly, I'm sure people want to know kind of how to follow you and where to find more of you. So why don't you just plug your stuff really quickly and then yeah, you guys will have to come back next Thursday to see more of Sarah. So go ahead, Sarah. Where can they find you?
Yeah. Also, accessible like through any of these platforms that I'm about to list. Like if you want to chat and have a buddy to talk to, like I almost always respond to everyone if I can. But I'm mostly on Instagram, which is sunwithsundays, and everything else follows that. So I just launched a YouTube channel. I also just launched a podcast, which is all about intrusive thoughts and OCD. So I have a new podcast as of last month, a new YouTube channel. I try to get on TikTok, but guys, it's really hard. I'm not that person. I've attempted, but mainly, yeah. So Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Instagram, Sun with Sundays. I also have a website where I list OCD resources and kind of blog posts and things like that, and channels to all those things. So I do have a website, again, Sun with Sundays. One word, hopefully easy to remember, per my personality. But
oh my gosh, I did not know about your podcast. I knew about the website. I knew about all the other things. If you need help with any of that stuff, we will help you out with YouTube. We'd love to help you out, and podcasts. We'll have to chat more, but yeah, guys, there's no shortage of Sarah. So I'll make sure to tag her on our No CD page on Instagram so that you guys can easily find her. And like I said, she'll be back next Thursday. So thank you all for your wonderful questions and for your support. Thank you, Sarah, for spending some time with us tonight. You are wonderful, and she'll see you next Thursday.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.